Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today we have from R.A.P Ferreira and Kenny Segal, The Night Green Side of It. This review unfortunately needs to begin with a series of curt answers that will hopefully head off any unnecessary questions. Did I know R.A.P Ferreira put out 2 albums last year in 2024? Yes. Did I have a reason for not covering them when he's put out a string of projects that I've really liked in the 2020s? Yeah. Was one of those reasons tied to the horrific allegations from an ex that surfaced in the summer of last year? Yeah. Was that the only reason? No. When you make your lyrics difficult to get to, I'm not going to be in a hurry to chase down your newest projects, especially if it's going to lead to additional grief in my comment section in an otherwise jammed up year. This is not new for me. It's crossed over years and genres. Did I listen to the albums anyway in 2024, or the second when they wound up and streaming in early 2025? Yeah, and they're both pretty good. Although his occasional poetic opacity on the second project when said allegations were in view, that was certainly a choice, especially if you read between the lines at all or watched how people moved outside of the art. That's paratext that matters in a small, intensely collaborative scene where everyone thinks they're smarter than they are, know both more and less about each other than they do, and precarity is built into the business model. Now, do I believe he was cleared when the case was dismissed and ruled in his favor due to lack of evidence or witness? I would not be reviewing the album otherwise. I've given other acts like Freddie Gibbs that sort of grace before. It also helps that the lyrics were made publicly available for once. That matters. But does that mean I now like R.A.P Ferreira again, willing to shell out a lot of cash for his new vinyl? Truthfully, I don't have that answer. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. I don't know him or his circle personally, so I can only judge the full picture of what I've seen from him and elsewhere over the years and taking whatever information I can. The majority of my interactions with him have not been particularly charitable, which cuts both ways because we're both arrogant writers in our mid-30s who heft our self-awareness like a shield that can nevertheless crack and break more often than we want to admit. And I don't engage in the intellectual dishonesty to separate a poet from his work, to absolve me of any resonance in seeking morality in my consumption. I savor a lot of that complexity, and if that's going to be branded heresy, we're all damned for what we do. We know that. And now that all of that's been established, if Outstanding Understanding from last year had some level of questionable opacity while being caught up in some of that maelstrom, which was, yeah, understandable while dealing with the brunt of it, but could land some sour notes in the fragmentation and, again, between the lines, the Night Green Side of It has no such illusions. Reuniting with Kenny Segal to complete the trilogy running through So the Flies Don't Come and Purple Moonlight pages, this is easily R.A.P Ferreira at his most direct, embittered, and self-consciously precarious in a long time, angry at those who have turned their back on him in the scene, and with a fierce desire to hold to what was his, write his way out. Thus, Kenny Segal's production meets the moment and feels more menacing, ramshackle, off-kilter, with loud injections of horns alongside the unstable grooves to take the form of jazz that is as much alienating as it is evocative of this older poetic tradition, like the haunted pianos of Spicer and I, or the brang squonk alongside the squeal of credentials. The feeling that many of these songs are way more shambling fragments or loops where hopefully a progression might be able to materialize. The feeling is confrontational, relentlessly self-righteous, and as someone who has been long accustomed to R.A.P Ferreira's energy and intensity, I don't want to do him a disservice and not keep the same energy in my critique and review. Because look, I'm not remotely bothered by the braggadociousness on display. Across the first half of this album, he proves that he's really damn good at that. The sort of nasty bars when he's not bothering to mince them. And on the bassy dazzle on the casual is just hilarious, provided it feels tempered by wisdom and insight in the big picture. His candor when thinking bigger was what moved me most in the late 2010s and early 2020s. So while I think the embrace of bitterness to then be savored off the dusty percussion and fluttery pianos of Good Hustle is, well, again, a choice. You can tell by the shambling sobriety of Naming the Feeling that in flipping the whole "are you winning son" meme into some self-awareness, it begins to creep into the picture, especially as he later mentions the hard loss of his grandfather, who told him being a daddy means I die first. You gotta be the one to sacrifice for them. And that focus on family, community, and generational continuity becomes a through line to really cling on to. It's the emotionality, as he's acutely aware of those who will weaponize the systemic factors around this case against him further. Despite the exits he notes on Good Hustle, there are some folks who will stand behind him along the way, especially as he knows himself that he can make himself unlikable. Poets often do, that he'll take the hard path by refusing to get himself boxed in. The third verse on the hollowed out apricity, it's probably being the strongest note of balancing it all out here. And it's not like he can't build something again. Reminds me of an old quote from Zach Hill of Death Grips: if you have not had money your entire life, you're not afraid of having none again. You know how to survive. And by the closer Real Jazz, he can't help but kind of laugh because a white person asks him if he's the problem. He says, yeah, his work touches on that frequently, and you'll have to buy it and hear it in installments. And that white guy did just that. Probably at a premium. The Billy Woods and Vince Staples, he certainly knows how to work his audience, and that's kind of ironic in a certain way. So look, I hear some of the grief at relationships lost, so much of what he has burned down or those who will never come back, but he's been true to himself. That should win out in the end, right? Well, that's the thing now, isn't it? R.A.P. Ferreira knows this goes beyond a rap battle, but he's canny enough to recognize the fundamental rule to limit when you have to play defense. Control the time of possession so you can run it down their throats, which in this case might be the extended instrumental outros or just the bars upon bars. That this war is going to be won in the trenches, if at all, but if I'm going to continue that football metaphor, sometimes the run game will stall out. You need to distribute to the tight end or wide out to open up the run lanes, like push down the field, which is why any albums touching on this subject matter directly often temper their resentment or rage with more self-conscious introspection. They show greater dimensionality to win from different angles with different styles. And I feel like every hyper-talented nerd, and R.A.P. Ferreira is one, needs to hear this at least once in their life, because I sure as hell did. You can be among the best at what you do, and absolutely right in your convictions and facts, and that should be enough. But if you're an asshole, you're eventually going to run out of the people who want to care and that you want to care. And showing self-awareness by acknowledging that asshole side, it eventually runs out of gas too, because they get sick of your shit, especially when the folks in your corner start getting populated by those who tell you what you want to hear to then further their own ends. And while I'm not saying that's happened yet, there were some bars about women on Blood Quantum and By the Head that might be explainable in his circumstance and emotionality, but tread a little past good taste. That Faraday's Cage one jumps to mind, and the latter of which is saved by the jagged strings, undulating drums, and a truly killer second verse. And that also creeps into the slightly paranoid subtext as well. It's not always the best look. It falls into the same uneasy feeling that for as much as R.A.P. Ferreira is trying to preserve a poet's calm and composure across the album, that for as often as that composure is being mentioned alongside the paratext of him in the larger scene, it's harder to believe. It's constantly saying, I'm not mad. But then again, if there's something about the night green side of it, I keep saying the night green shade, is that R.A.P. Ferreira can be his own worst enemy. He knows that. And when this album unspools those heavier thoughts, the album shows some really potent dimensionality, but it's also frequently not that. And even then, I still think it works more than often than not because the wordplay's so sharp, the production utterly nails that challenge, and there's some vicarious thrill in striding through the wreckage knowing you have weathered the storm. Again, I don't deny the resonance when it kind of feels earned. I might have a bit of a weak spot for it. But while the adage Ruby Yacht Forever seems to imply any hiatus he might take as a mirage, I'm not sure that's true. I'll take him at his word here, at least for now, that he's on hiatus for the solo stuff, especially as this sort of heady catharsis can be enervating at the very end, especially when you remember why you do it. They ultimately take priority. For this album, not sure it's gonna make my year-end list, nor whether you'll give it a chance at all for a proper listen, even if I know it's probably worth it. Look, I wouldn't be surprised either way. I'll leave it there. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Whoo, boy, I know this one's going to be contentious. If people bother to watch it at all. I am late to this particular album, preferably for good reason. Honestly, I expected it to be denser than it was. It actually is probably one of his more accessible albums, strangely enough. Definitely not a jump-on point, I will stress that. But hey, again, leave your comments down there below, and Rory, if you happen to see this, look, man, I wanted to be in your corner. I know you and I have not seen each other eye to eye for a long-ass time, and some of that's on me, some of that is on you. I'm willing to take the lumps there. We'll see where it all falls out. But hey, beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if you all want to get involved in helping support the channel, get albums onto my schedule in the new year, or just yell at me on my Discord, link to my Patreon and YouTube memberships is right over there. Once again, don't feel obligated. Tough times out there, recession's coming, brace yourselves for that, but the option's available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.